There you go.
Splendid. Thank you very much, Stuart. We'll give people 3 or 4 minutes or 3 minutes or so to come and join us. But I thought it might be worth just opening the mic and showing them that we are here. We have an incredible array of people standing by to talk to them and answer questions and stand at the bar, stand on the bar stool and thump the bar and have a bit of a chat and a rant to the audience. Normally best done after a couple of beers. That's definitely done. I have some of my best business meetings after a beer or two, I think, where you've got you can open up and talk a little bit more freely than you possibly would over just a cup of tea.
It's a good excuse, Ian.
Oh, not that actually I need an excuse, really.
No.
Because a day without a gin and tonic is a day wasted, I feel.
Oh.
And it was quite worrying at the beginning of the week that I had almost run out of gin. I'd only got probably about a litre left of various different gins. But luckily enough, we managed to get a slot for Asda coming to deliver. And so I've got 4 or 5 bottles coming on Monday. All essential, I must say. You know, this is essential shopping. It's all part of the government's guidelines for essential items.
Did anyone pick up on that cool-off rule?
No.
Escape your house for a bit. You can go and stay at a mate's house, can't you, to cool off for a few days?
No way.
Oh yeah, there's a little, you know, if you're having like rows with anyone, you can go and.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. But the problem is, I might get thrown out of the house. And the problem is, I don't have any friends. So I'd have to live in the garden with a dog.
I'm your friend, Ian.
Oh, thanks, Jerry. Very kind.
Always.
Splendid. Right, so we've come to the top of the hour, and I can see we've got 24 attendees in and waiting for us. So it just brings for me to welcome you all to the COMIT Happy Hour. Another chance to have a drink and have a conversation with some industry experts at the end of the week, starting to unwind and relax a little bit. You'll have to forgive me in a little while. I might even undo my top button and start to become a little bit more relaxed. Today, we've got some cracking presentations coming up on the theme of productivity, which Stuart has been hosting and encouraging, infusing and banging the drum on for a little while. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand over to Stuart to give you a few of the rules and regulations for the chat in the bar and to introduce our speakers. So over to you, Stuart.
Cheers, thanks, Ian. Welcome, everybody. To help everybody enjoy the experience today and get more out of the session, what I want to do is just, if I can just click on the first slide, I want to encourage as far as possible the use of, just bear with me a second, the use of the control bar on the right hand side. We've got a couple of options today, which I'm going to give 2 options to ask questions. It's really important we get some questions towards the end. So you can either raise your hand and I can bring you in to actually ask the panel or the panelist the question, or you can just type your question in the question box. So what Ian alluded to is this productivity initiative, which COMIT's been running now for some time. It basically, behind all technological initiatives in our industry is a simple goal, and that is improving productivity. Often the best improvements come from a combination of knowledge, that's the people, or the process, and the technology. I mentioned COMIT's running an ongoing series of webinars that support the productivity initiative. Myself and Ian head them up, and they're organised to help companies involved in construction or generally capital projects to spread best practice through improvements in productivity across the industry. Now, I also like to give a mention to our sponsors, both O2 and Rebim, who've been excellent at supporting this initiative right from the start. But it leads me to the questions. What does productivity mean to you? Do you and your organisations have the means to improve productivity? What else is out there making a difference to other industries, businesses and organisations, and how can it help you? And do you have a system or a process that could help others? And can you share it through the COMIT webinar series?
Stuart, just 2 seconds. We can't see slides.
Oh no. Right, just bear with me a second.
And Andy Radley is online, but he's having trouble with his camera, so he's not going to join us on the webcam bit.
Right, excuse me a second.
There we go.
Oh, going now.
Right, I need to put it on full screen.
There's one out of the desktop, Stuart. You need some project controls for that.
Thank you. We do indeed, we do indeed. Okay, so in respect of project controls, which you can see is right at the top, we've got a number of other areas and initiatives that we in COMIT are looking to improve productivity within. We have covered a few of these already, but we've got an opportunity to look at many more, and collectively this can improve productivity for anybody involved in capital projects. Even if it was a small increment in each one, it's still worthy of having a look. What I would like to say is today's presentation comes from Milestone and Oracle, and as I mentioned, it's project controls. Project controls means a lot of different things to lots of different people. It can be a very emotive subject with people who may get very frustrated when things don't go so well. But one thing for sure is that project control, it is at all stages of a construction project, from the estimate to completion. It includes all of the people, the processes and the tools used to manage the cost and schedule of a project. It also includes the careful evaluation of risks and opportunities that could have an influence on the outcome of the project. So bring on onto today's session, an evolution of project control, and both Mario and Hugh are going to take us through that. Before I hand you over, we will hear from Mario and Hugh. We'll give a brief overview of how Oracle CEGBU has evolved from core critical path scheduling to encompass a range of new complementary capabilities to support modern engineering and construction methods and challenges. We'll then have a panel made up of COMIT members and industry experts to discuss some aspects and some great points of view. So I'll introduce Mario and Hugh. Mario is a chartered accountant and after qualification worked in project controls and project accounting both directly and in respect of enabling software application. This included working for a steel fabrication erection company and had a 5-year spell in Saudi Arabia with Lockheed in charge of commissioning, leasing and facility management of all Lockheed 1000 Middle Eastern properties and compounds. On return to the UK, became involved in software development for a number of markets, finally in respect of time recording and processing for large projects. Mario's worked for Milestone since 1999 and brought Milestone into the COMIT community in the mid-2000s. Milestone has been a Primavera partner since 1994 and an Oracle partner since Oracle acquisition in 2008. On to Hugh. Hugh Cole is a graduate of Cardiff in '97 and Bristol in 2000. that's the university, and is a principal consultant in the Oracle construction and engineering business units. Hugh has over 30 years experience working in customers in a wide range of sectors, engineering, construction and utilities. Hugh is a keen musician. Hugh's music has been performed by ensembles such as the RPO, which I think is the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra, Music Theatre Wales and the Corey Band. And Hugh wants me to point out that the photo of Hugh is taken from the front cover of the British Bandsman, a publication made infamous by the programme Have I Got News for You? So, I'll hand you over to Mario and Hugh.
Thanks, Stuart. Welcome, everybody. Stuart's covered just about anything I could have wanted to say as introduction. Obviously, I've been with Primavera for a long time, or rather working with Primavera for a long time. Oracle took over the Primavera business, I think about 2008. There's been a significant improvement in the way that it deals with the product set, deals with the full life cycle of project and program controls. And I think it's a good time now for us to demonstrate what's been happening, what we've moved to, and Hugh knows more about that than even I do. So without any more ado, I'll just pass over to him to talk about what they've been doing and we've been following in terms of project controls over the last 12 years. Hugh, all yours.
Brilliant. Thanks, Mario. Can we see my screen?
Yep.
Yeah, brilliant. So there's a couple of areas that constantly come up, particularly when I was talking with customers in the construction area, and that is really around managing the collaboration. So what I want to focus on today is starting to look at how we can drive efficiencies and reduce the challenges there. And where this typically comes from is in the early stages of the project, we might be sending initial information, emails, contract type correspondence, such as early warnings and things like that. And then this exasperates as we go through into the next phases of the project. So we then start to get into the first time we cut the soil basically for a new building, right the way through to the construction phases. And as we go through the life cycle of that, more and more correspondence occurs. So that is often handled via various different means. So it may be multiple mail facilities, there may be various different silos of documentation. And it starts to really become uncontrollable and very difficult to see who said when and what, and be able to track back and holistically see where things are. So, for instance, on pure transmittals, I was talking to a large construction company earlier this week, and it's still a common thread where they say, one of our biggest things are we just don't have the latest version of any document to be sure that we're building the right thing, and that's a real challenge. And passing that information back and forth is even more so. So if you take as that project grows through its life cycle, you may start off with a number of people within the design phase, but that grows and grows. So when we look at what people are doing with our software, it starts to get up to the thousands of people collaborating across hundreds of companies. So not just the general contractor, but right the way down through to somebody who might be building a small widget down in a supply chain factory that's involved with maybe a HVAC unit or something similar. Millions of documents shared across often several different countries, particularly in this area, and lots of different correspondence. And we've seen customers having entire shipping containers set aside just to hold the documentation of a major construction project. So how do you then get the information out of that shipping container? It's a very hard thing to do to get to that detail. So where we have come from then is, if you like, many people probably know Oracle from the P6 perspective and the critical path methodology. And if you said Primavera to anybody, they often think of P6. It's worth saying that obviously we've had many capabilities prior to P6. There was P3 and other software prior to that, as well as different contract capabilities and portfolio capabilities that we've always had in our kit bag. And part of our name change from Primavera to the Construction Engineering Business Unit is really to get people away from thinking of us just from a P6 perspective, because whilst P6 is still very prevalent and is a very good tool for the planning, execution, and monitoring, what we find is that the challenges, like I've just illustrated, are far wider in project controls than just having the baseline and schedule and forecast information to hand. So what we've done is we've built what we call the Primavera Cloud, and we built this from the ground up. We've taken the core capabilities of P6, so there's that scheduling engine, but supplemented it with the other components that used to maybe sit on premise in installation or people's desktops. So expanding that out to be able to run Monte Carlo simulations upon 3-point estimates to give us what the probabilistic outcome of that schedule is, maybe from a P50 or P90 perspective, making it easier to get all of the protagonists into one solution. So multi-company access into that schedule via very detailed, a very powerful, what we call workspaces, which gets away from some of the challenges we saw in the past with global libraries and so on. You can have the companies working in their workspaces and then sending and collaborating information across. And also then providing a way of joining critical path methodology with what we see on the job site, which is lean scheduling. So, you know, if you go into many offices, you'll see a whiteboard there with a large amount of post-it notes on it to show what they're committing to on a day-to-day basis. And this can involve multiple teams, multiple disciplines of, you know, who's doing maybe the first 6 electrics on one floor and who's doing plumbing on another, to try and make sure that they're not stepping on each other's toes and getting each other's way. So we provide within that the ability to combine both disciplines. So having the critical path schedule, which could be coming from P6 or just be in the Primavera Cloud anyway, and allowing a Kanban type approach where companies can do on a daily or weekly basis what they're committing to, and then tracking those commitments. So on top of that, we then have our ACONEX project common data environment. And this is what really solves the challenge of having all of those documents, all of that correspondence in one place. And that is also there's no limit on the file size that can be uploaded in there. It's much safer for the email because we're just sharing information within the product. And it has the concept of data neutrality. So company A, for instance, can be working away on their documents. Company B is not going to see that until company A decides that they want to share that information with the other organization. So it enhances the feeling of trust, make sure that companies can use it. And from that perspective, what we've also done there is change the way we're licensing. So it may not be, people are probably familiar with the kind of the P6 on-premise type approach where it's user-based. Within the world of the Primavera Cloud and ACONEX, it could be a project-based, which means that you could be standing up these multi-tenant environments very, very quickly, inviting any one of those customers or suppliers into that organization without any hindrance of licensing. So for instance, on the previous slide where we looked at, thousands or maybe tens of thousands of people involved in a major project, you're paying for the access for that project. Anyone of that organization can then use the platform to be able to collaborate effectively. And then within that, we've found that organizations are using BIM in a much more expansive way. So we can bring in the IFC files, we can bring in the 3D models and have that as a collaborative interface to be able to communicate things like clashes and issues, to be able to link all of that correspondence and documentation into the BIM model. So at the end of it, we end up almost as an as-built repository that some customers then use that moving forward as almost a digital twin of the construct of the building that's being created. So what we'll do is we'll have a look first of all at the project CDE and how that can solve those problems, and then we'll briefly look at how that connects to Primavera Cloud and what Primavera Cloud can bring on top of that. So here we see this is Oracle ACONX, so this is a common data environment. What we see is a multiple number of projects here. So we'll concentrate on this particular one, and then we have various different processes that would be set up for each of these projects. So you may have an NEC type, you may have a FIDIC type approach. It'll be whatever is required, and again, it could be templatized. So for instance, we can drill into the FileStar demo here, and we can see, you know, where we are from a request for information perspective. This could be obviously time sensitive to make sure we're getting the request for information responded to in a timely fashion to hopefully reduce the number of compensation events that may be triggered from that, as well as things like variations within the contracts, and then down to operating in the field as well. So we provide mobile capability as well, which includes visualization of the BIM model and the ability to do field inspections and raise issues directly from the site into a single area. So we're covering lots of different points in a single manner. If we drill into these requests for information, we can then see very quickly what we need to be focusing on. And here you can see we have lots of different correspondence between lots of organizations that are involved in this particular bid. And then we can see, obviously this is demonstration data, so the time delay is extreme. Hopefully we wouldn't be waiting this long to respond to a site instruction, but then we can drill directly into that project correspondence and see where that information or what was requested on that, including things like the full audit trail of what was sent right the way through the process. And you'll note as well here, which I'll talk about later, is that we can actually link things to change events and variations directly from that incoming correspondence. So it gives us a chain right the way through. Now, these correspondence, as I mentioned, would also include things like maybe a transmittal or documentation. So I could be inviting any number of people into the organization, into the project, and we could then say, well, okay, we want various different correspondence types. So for instance, we might want a transmittal, and then that will set to some auto defaulted fields that we require. Okay. We then can easily look for people. So I can send this to Tim Young, but it could come from somebody else. And incidentally, so if they've been using this ACONX in any other project around this tenant, they'll be available within the global directory. So it just makes that onboarding even more straightforward. So I can issue this review. Say I wanted to respond it within a certain time frame, so 7 days, and we can then look for. This is going to be the steel diagrams, maybe. Okay, and then we can attach documents from our document register. So that the whole concept here is to make sure and make information as easy as possible. So I can then look for any of my steel drawings that are currently in that register and pick them here to add in. So I'm going to send these. Now what you'll see is that this is automatically selected the latest revision. And on the search here, if I want to see previous revisions, I can show that document history. So it's immediately solving the problem of saying, right, we need to make sure that we've got the right version of that document attached. And then that's going to send them. So if I preview that, you can see what Tim Young is going to receive. He's going to receive this email with the documents, and then he can choose to either view those or he can then log into the document register and just make sure that he is looking at the latest versions. If, for instance, there was a major delay between that transmittal being sent and him accessing it, he can then go use that option to make sure that he's looking at exactly the latest capabilities within that. So the document here can be bulk uploaded. I've moved many gigabytes of data through Aconex over the years, and there's no limit at all on the information that you can hold in it or the file size that you're sending into it. But to make things as simple as possible, you can have searches shared across your organization. So it's the concept of, right, find me any approved structural drawings. Because the other thing is, if you think of that shipping container that might have loads and loads of the documents within it, is how do you get to that very quickly? So here we have no concept of folder structure. It's all done by tagging. So the tagging is done during the upload process. If we look for companies to provide that information directly, we can get that commonality across the project. And if we drill into one of these, for instance, we can then look at that document. We can see the full document history, look back at the revisions of it, and also have a viewer within here. So it allows me then to open all of these document types and be able to see the information, and I can go into a markup mode and I can start to maybe stamp in a signature on here, highlight any key area that I might be concerned with, and the next person would see that review in that process. So it opens up that collaborative capability in a much more straightforward way. So that's how we can basically share that information and start to put those correspondence together. Now, if we are tracking that within the model, what we can do then is use our viewer, which again, as I mentioned, is available on the mobile app as well. But what this allows me to do is bring in the ISC file that could either be sent as a transmittal, or it could have been loaded in here as a plug-in to things like the common authoring tools that we see used throughout the life cycle. And this was going to show me then that the model, and you can see we can overlay lots of different information onto that particular model. I think my children must be playing video games because it's gone a little bit slow, my internet connection. But it allows me to drill in, see anything, have walkthroughs through here. We can look at it from an architectural perspective or a spatial perspective, so we could look at it from a type. And we can click on a particular area and see the properties that have been brought in from the model within that. When we're using this in conjunction with things like inspections and correspondence, we can then use the viewpoints. So for instance, if I go to a viewpoint, this will take me directly to that particular area and will show me all the relevant information on here. So this is the top level plant room within the building. And within it, we can then see any linked documentation. So it could be the inspection, so the installation itself, any warranties, maintenance manuals related to that, and also any linked correspondence that have been entered. So for instance, somebody that's doing the installation or inspection, we can then drill into that correspondence directly and see where that information came from. So it's providing a single capability to be able to put all that information together. There's the viewpoint in the model, and we can then track that. Now, one of the other elements with the documents as well, how do we make sure that we could be looking at a combination of documents and keeping those in track? And where that comes into play is things like the packages. So if we look at our packages and package reviews, what this does is, for my organization, it allows me to bundle things together and say, right, what key 5 or 6 documents that are interrelated. So for instance, the concrete pre-pour here, or detailed design package, and look at the documents within that. So for instance, if this set of 4 documents here is I can check that whether they're up to date or not. So here I can see I've got this one's been updated since the last time this package was approved. So again, it's making sure I've got that latest information. And likewise, from a supplier perspective, I can look at information that I'm expecting from my supplier. So it may be, if we look at here, for instance, this particular package is the mechanical submittal, and we can see that here we've put in place markers of documents that we're expecting from the supplier, but haven't yet received. So for instance, this is what we call basically an empty document saying we need the drawing for this mechanical area, and we want to track that through its life cycle. As we're executing and building out, this is where we can start to use things like the field inspections and issues. So this is where QC would be going around and making sure that things are done. So they can upload their standard performers if they want, and raise issues directly within the solution, and then link it to other correspondence and documentation if they wish. Okay. So apologies, my internet appears to be slightly slow. Okay, I'll move on from there. I'll come back to that later. So. Okay. So essentially, this will list all of the issues. So for instance, defects that have been raised, as well as corresponding pictures and information, where we can then look at any extra details in that, track them to any events. So this allows me to be able to very easily collect from anybody in the supply chain an issue that's happening on site. Okay. As I mentioned before, we can link these events into the cost area, and the cost area is a very straightforward cost sheet where we can have any form of structure, basically, which allows us to then say, right, what's our control account, what's the control elements making up this cost sheet, and define the contracts that are all being involved within this particular area that can be then sent out perhaps for tenders and bids, and be able to track that information back and forth. Okay. Right. Apologies for this, I seem to have a slight issue. Just while we wait for this, are there any questions that have come up so far as we move into the project controls? Into the cost worksheet.
I don't see any questions yet, Hugh. Andy, have you got a question? Oh.
Yeah, drop me to. I've got one that springs to mind. I'm a great believer in technology, of course, being in that industry, and very much in favour of using systems to collaborate online. And from my experience on projects, it only works if you do you've got to kind of have an all or nothing attitude. So you've got to make that the only place where you count deliverables. The minute you allow a lot of in fact, every major project I've been involved with starts off like this, and then allows what is equivalent of bypassing document control, people emailing outside the system. If you don't make the system the only place where you count deliverables, it just doesn't work, and that tends to be the problem. The software does the job. Do the people do the job? Do they stick to the rules? Do they use the system? We've all seen this pressures, the minute people start bypassing the workflows and ensuring that they use the right processes, it all falls over.
Yeah.
So
we saw that on the Crossrail project quite a few years back, where people were trying to bypass that. But what was really good was in the actual contract itself was said that they would only accept information passed through the document control system. No letters, no emails, no phone calls. If the communication wasn't passed through that system, then it didn't happen, basically, which meant you could control that sort of world. But I think quite a few people in the legal world will probably back me up on this one. If we don't have it in the contract, people will always find a way to wriggle out of it and try and do something else. Everything's got to be backed up by a big stick. Maybe a cash incentive as well, carrot and stick stuff. Wonder whether
Absolutely.
it's worth killing your camera queue that might use up the bandwidth.
Good point.
Just to keep a check on the time, chaps, we are coming up to 24 minutes left of the happy hour. So,
okay,
there you go.
Okay, I'll try and be as brief as possible then. So effectively, this is the cost worksheet where we have the ability to break down the project into the various cost elements, and then relate it to the schedule activities. The schedule activities is coming from that CPM, so it's coming from either P6 or it could be, or in this case, Primavera Cloud. So if we were to run, for instance, that schedule integration, what we can see then is that we're able to bring in a number of elements directly from the Primavera Cloud. Okay. Now, within this as well, we can also track things like our variance analysis and look at the various performance areas down within each of the structure, and also then track things like our contracts. Now, I think one of the unique things here is that what we're able to do is share elements of our project down through the supply chain. So we might be sending out a bid for those particular set of works, and then each of these contracts in each of these suppliers can then use the cost worksheet in their way to track their projects as well. To track their contracts as well. So it becomes a much more inclusive area to track both downstream and upstream contracts. So in this case, this is a general contractor. So we could just track, for instance, the contracts that are agreed with the owner, for instance. So where that schedule information is coming from, that could be coming from the new Primavera Cloud. So the Primavera Cloud is not the same as P6. It's built far more extensively on that. We can see we've got a collaborative area as well. It's typical critical path methodology schedule here, but also what we can do is then link that into the more agile aspects that we see on the field. So down into information such as the tasks themselves. So for instance, on this particular drainage activity, I've got a whole set of tasks related to this. And those are the tasks that have been planned, not within the activity, but down on my task board. So they can be outside of the planning window, and I'll get an alert here from the schedule to say that these particular subtasks are being outside of that planning window. So it combines both things together. So if we go to the work plan, what we can see then is the ability for those individual tasks to be split across the various different organizations, so they can commit on a day-to-day basis of what work that they want to do. So each different color here represents a different supplier, and then they might just say, oh, we can do that on that day. This could be done here, and so on. And then they can make commitments to doing those, and you can also associate each of those tasks back and forth. But what it means is this dotted line, it shows that we're actually outside of the activity, which is the top level here that's come from the CPM schedule. So it's combining those two. You can also then do the risk analysis within here. So for instance, you can have a defined risk register. I'll just hop across to another project here quickly, but what this gives me the ability to do is have a detailed risk register that are associated to the project activities to then be able to run the Monte Carlo simulations to then show where we are from a risk perspective. So if we go to the analysis here, all this done in the cloud. We're not taking the schedule out. We've got the schedule in there. We can have multiple versions of the schedule to be able to look at what our likelihood end date is, for instance, and cost. So that gives us the ability to do all of the life cycle of the project within the Primavera Cloud and the Aconex CDE. So to finish off on that point of view, so what we're aiming to do here is to provide effectively a very quick to access project success platform to take all of the aspects that we look at through the life cycle and make that very easily accessible to any number of suppliers to enable project success. So that kind of concludes what I wanted to show you today.
Well,
so I'll pass back to you, Stuart.
Thank you very much, Hugh. Thank you. That was great. Okay, we have a long list of questions here. Just give me a second. I need to just take control back. Thank you. Okay. So my first question, just give me a second. My first question is, okay, Harry, thanks very much for joining us. You can hear me okay? Your mic's okay? Mic check, yeah? Okay.
Mic check, Stuart, yeah.
I've got a couple of questions that I'm going to ask Mario and Hugh in a second, but I've got one question I'm going to ask first, and this concerns the contracting world. We've got a few EPCs with us today. We've got Balfour Beatty represented by Harry Parnell, and we've got Morgan Sindall represented by Andy Radley. We've got others from outside the industry, engineering organisations. We've got Graham Oakeshaw from A-System, and we've got Andy Hall from Azurlog. So I've got a mixture of questions here, and I'm going to try and do this in the best way to get the best replies, if that makes sense. Now, first question I've got here, and Harry, this is for you. What do you see as the key #1 requirement for getting project controls to work on any project?
Okay, so thanks, Stuart. At the moment in time, I see common coding being a key thing that needs to be defined. Where you've got the estimation team, you've got the planning team, you've got all the different separate sort of we just saw in the last slides. If you don't have a common coding approach, you will not get the data analytics to show at the project board meetings.
Okay. Yeah.
Just a quick question. Is that a common coding on tasks? As in kind of like, so you've got a almost like a task list. There's a common coding against those.
Yeah. So at the moment, time and that we've got multiple codes on a project in. We've got obviously document management codes. We've got location codes. We've got cost codes. We've got sort of planning activity code sets. At the moment, kind of reviewing that in the last sort of 18 months in Balfour BT, what we see is we can't aggregate the data together because some people called it slightly different. Yes, you could go through a mapping exercise, but with that mapping exercise and that kind of thing, you're putting a load of waste into the process.
Yeah.
To try and agree that coding sets across each of the disciplines in a mobilisation phase is key to get that right for then all the reporting to go through. We're currently doing that on a few projects, including sort of HS2 at the moment in time, is making sure before we mobilise any system or any process, the standard common coding approach has gone forward, and our project management office own them code sets.
Brilliant. Have you looked at the CPV codes, which are the the European procurement task codes?
I've got a call after this at 4:30 to start looking at sort of like other coding. So we've got our current cost coding has been issued by clients. They give us a WBS EBS codes. So normally we should be working to the client code sets. But what we see is a mismatch between them code sets in. No one's asking to actually use that type of coding structure.
Yeah.
So we're looking at what the client gives us, go back to them as a change to say, actually, we need to align these code sets. So that one now, if you send me that in a message in, it'd be good to know what that standard is. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
Thanks, Harry.
Thank you.
Thanks, Harry. I'll come back to you in a minute because there's another question I think that should be for you. But I'm gonna bring in Paul Wilkinson now from PWCom. Paul, I'm just testing your mic for starters, but my question for you, yes, loud and clear, yeah. Let's see if we can do the webcam as well. Okay, so Paul, how is the project controls market evolving, and specifically around software as a service, mobile data, IoT, and perhaps also bringing in the globalization and international standards?
Okay, I
I
taught at a lot of events. Yeah, I taught a lot of events last year, and for me, it wasn't just about BIM, which was sort of flavor of the month for a long time. I talked about the kinds of technology that Hugh's demonstrated with software as a service platforms like Aconex, with their field applications, providing that kind of level of access out on site. But we've also shifted away from a focus on documents and email and correspondence towards more model-based thinking. And that takes us into the raw area of data. And we are beginning now to connect the data that we have in construction to the data that we use in asset management, which obviously pushes us into the whole life cycle of built assets. And for client organizations, that means they will want assets which they are able to consistently manage across their life cycle for decades, not just say the 5 years it takes for a project to be planned, designed and constructed, but the 5 decades through which the asset needs to be operated and maintained. So for that, they're going to need data which they can access throughout the life cycle. And it starts us to think in terms of international standards on open data formats, which are persistent and allow people to access information throughout the life cycle of that asset. And that means we've got to start thinking in terms of global standards that could be applied by clients and their perhaps supply chain organizations, wherever they happen to be, rather than applying just the local norms that perhaps we used 20 or 30 years ago, which were peculiar to a particular geographical market.
Okay. I have another question. Sorry, go on.
It's quite interesting. I think that the COBE information that was typically looked at to try and solve that doesn't really come up to the right level. And we are working extensively with BIM standards around the world to try and make sure that we have got that. In fact, one of the things that we're looking at is having a new asset construct within Aconex so that we can have the golden thread go right through that, so we can help to support those standards as and when they are available. So the container information is all there.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Paul. Thanks, you. I've got another question here. I'm going to ask this to Andy Radley. Andy, I think you're unmuted there. One of the things that was talked about is interoperability. And with multiple disparate systems out there, the whole thing is confusing, expensive, or an expensive nightmare, especially as a lot of systems seem to come with an enterprise price tag. What are your thoughts on that, Andy? Can I bring your webcam in, by the way? Can I do that?
Let's have a go.
Just bear with me a second. Hang on. Just bear with me a second. Hang on a minute. Andy, there you are. See you now. Can I see you now?
You might be able to see me, I can't.
Okay, right. Anyway, you've got the mic. I have set the webcam to bring you in, but are you okay with that question?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, you know, the challenge I found, and I've seen this across, you know, I've worked for 3 tier 1s now, and you know, we're primarily companies made out of other companies with legacy systems, and people have grown up using those systems, and trying to shift them is difficult. From a common data, from a CDE perspective, you know, trying to shift from one to another is problematic. We recently had our viewpoint licensing had come up not long ago, and there was a conversation around should we shift to another platform, and then there was, well, what about all the legacy information we've got? You know, all the stuff in archive, it's going to cost a fortune. How are we going to access it? You know, so we've got, like most companies, just got multiple systems that just don't talk to one another. We've got databases of information that don't talk to one another. We've got information formatted, like Harry said, standards of information that are not being followed. The way we code things aren't being followed. It's you know, I think starting from scratch, things will be different. But the reality is we are where we are. And, you know, a large organization like Morgan Sindall, same historically for when I worked for Kier and Langerock, we just got entrenched. Culturally, people are used to working in a certain way, using certain technologies, probably not even used to collaborating. It's just a huge challenge, both from a people perspective and a technical perspective.
Yeah.
Can I just add to that? That what we tend to find with tier 1s is that they've invested an awful lot of money into a system that, you know, may be horrendously out of date now, but they are emotionally invested in it as well. So so it does take an awful lot to move them on from.
I think also, sorry, just to jump in there, that, you know, we're always going through change. You know, I wouldn't say change for change's sake, but, you know, we very recently rolled out Office 365. Some people found that very painful, and then we're trying to introduce other systems on top of it. I think people just get change lag, and it's you know, depending on who you talk to, one aspect of change is more important than the other. But it's very difficult. I think people just want to get on without the distractions and, you know, start doing the job, as inefficiently as that may be. But they just see they're being dragged back by having to rethink the way they do things.
Can I ask then, Andy, because our experience has been, you know, obviously we've been using Office 365 for some time, but the uptake, particularly in the current situation, has been absolutely excellent, and people have really started falling in love with the system.
I think that has been an epiphany moment within the business. I saw on our internal Yammer feed just the other day how people had been using Office 365 and Teams to review a model remotely. And, you know, I was like saying, well, that's what I've been peddling all this time. You need to do this. And all of a sudden, because of the circumstances, you know, finding yourself forced to do it. So, you know, if one bright thing comes out of this, it's, you know, it's this idea that you don't have to travel, you know, to sites. You can do things remotely. You can do things, you know, you can, you know, getting back to the common data environment, you know, the single source of truth, everything structured in a place where you can find it. Historically, that's been very, very challenging.
Yeah. And well, we're at the point now where we've had to put a structure in place to stop the proliferation of people setting up their own team sites, and, you know, they're really engaging with the system, but we've almost had to put the brakes on them using it. So
yeah, it has become a victim of its own success. I mean, I'll be honest with you, I fell victim of it. I was doing some work with the work winning team a few weeks ago, and could I find the shared document that we're using in Teams?
So,
but yeah, at least I knew where to look for it rather than just being on a file server somewhere.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. Graham, while you're on, I got one question for you. You mentioned about 365 there, and it solved obviously a lot of problems and got around obstacles. What other obstacles do you see in the industry to prevent new functionality and help advance project delivery? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it depends on the industry that you're talking about. Particularly most of the industries that I'm involved in, which are energy, secure infrastructure type projects. Security is their key issue. I think with a lot of them, if you started talking to them about cloud-based systems, they would run a mile, to be completely frank. And I think what we're at risk of as an industry in this sort of digital arena is absolutely outpacing a load of people that can't keep up because of the security requirements that are incumbent upon them, site license conditions, that type of thing. So for me, I think that there's almost a confidence piece to be done with certain industries, and to ensure that we're building that confidence and demonstrating to them that these systems are secure and can't be accessed. Yeah. I mean, if I can elaborate on that without taking up too much time, what we found is that in the absence of having collaborative tools, people have started using WhatsApp, and the company has then been horrified that they're using WhatsApp, but actually WhatsApp's one of the most secure communication platforms on the planet. So there's no reason for the company to be horrified at that, but because then they don't feel in control of it because they don't understand it. They're concerned about it and they're anxious about it and telling people not to use it when actually it's probably fine. That makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, no, that's a really valid point. I'm conscious of time here, and I've got a number of questions lined up, which I can see, and I'm just bear with me a second, Andy Holt. I've got one question for you. You pretty much answered it anyway, and you talked about one system with all the bells and whistles in it. But one thing I have got is this recurring thing about data, and it's described as the new currency. But one question for you is, how do we use data better on our projects? Given what you know, your experience, what would you say to that?
Do you want me to link it back to what I said earlier?
Yeah.
It can follow on from that. So you've been involved in major projects, been involved in quite a few major projects, and from what I've seen, there's the old project controls mentality was all based on not hearsay, but overinflating performance, and you get into a vicious circle with the client's project manager and the main contractor, almost colluding performance to it's approval seeking from up above, and they get all the way to sort of like 98% complete, and then they sit there for what, 6 months and nothing's happened because they've sort of overcooked the project, really. The importance of data, really, back to what I was saying earlier, if you make it the only place, the designated systems and processes and digital workflows, if you make them the only place where you will pay and make it contractual, then you've got half a chance. If you don't, then you get into all these scenarios where it's all, base evaluations and things like that. Yeah, data's got to be literate and it's got to be available. It's easier said than done, because under project pressures, people buckle. Even the project manager, who has to report good news every week, and when they run out of good news, or they've overinflated the project, where do they go? It is easier said than done, but you've got to make it the only way. As Ian said, it's got to be contractual, otherwise.
Yeah.
I think you've got, and that is easier said than done as well.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. It is that's very very valid. I'm just conscious of the questions, the time and the questions. I've got quite a few here. I'm going to aim the next one at Paul. Paul, can you hear me? Okay. Are you unmuted? You are. One of the things that was mentioned earlier is about solutions and working together. But how do we get the software solutions to work together in a better way? And I'm specifically talking about the need for interoperability, the time and cost of poor interoperability. That's not lean, not adding value, not whole life. And the UK moves to improve and potentially mandate interoperability, and a potential white paper that's kicking around somewhere. Does that make sense? Oh, you're muted, Paul. Yeah, sorry. Unmute. Need to unmute.
All right, I am.
Yeah,
sorry.
Yeah. There you go.
Thank you. Sorry. I mentioned in a previous COMIT webinar a consultation document that was published recently through the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, BEIS, the Infrastructure Projects Authority, and the Centre for Digital Built Britain. They've listened to industry evidence and they're looking at creating a platform to support, in particular, government delivery of assets, looking out at establishing the next steps to some extent to future-proof the industry. I think if people want to contribute to that consultation, the document is available, and the consultation period goes through to the 15th of May. So we have a couple of weeks yet to respond to that, and I'd recommend that COMIT members have a look at that and make their contributions known. It's a big opportunity for us to switch away from the time wasted in changing file formats and data formats needlessly, because we're stuck with, because there's an adherence to the proprietary formats that come from vendors. Open standards mean that we can focus on delivering value in creating data that's in a form that can be used by clients throughout the asset lifecycle.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that. Okay. Got one more question. Harry, just before you go, can you answer this question just before you shoot off?
Yeah.
We've got one of the things that is quite topical, and that's data standards. Are you defining data standards on your projects with the suppliers?
That's my meeting that I've got to get on to.
All right, okay.
So it's a great Friday night call for the weekend for them to do a bit of homework. At the moment in time and that, we are defining data standards. We are trying to say kind of that these are the attribution that we need inside of the designs. We need to have the cost attribution in there to get the quantities out, and we want certain attribution that we can link in that to our P6 programs. Right. That's the key part, just developing the design side of things. Yeah. Yes, we're doing that with our tier 1 designers and that we utilise. But also, though, we're now pushing that further down the chain into sort of subcontractors as well, such as Temporary Works. So, yeah, we are trying to standardise on data standards. But again, it comes down to the coding. We need to provide them with the coding sets. And then once we provide the coding sets, they're adding that to their models and stuff like that, or linking that data to their models. So, yeah, sure. Hot topic, and we're spending most of my time at the moment in onboarding suppliers, that kind of thing, and getting them to sort of make sure. But the key thing is, though, on that, if you define the data standards, there needs to be a process to verify and validate that data coming in. Yeah. For many, many years, kind of like we've had CAD QA kind of stuff like that on many projects. Love it or hate it. It's like Marmite with a CAD QA. But still, though, the key thing is actually don't just check the graphical side of things. You need to put processes in place to check the data coming through as well. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, thanks, Harry, and thanks. I'm going to call it a day there with the questions. Any that I've not answered, I'll get back to you in an email or something of that order. But thank you very much for sending the questions in. Superb. Thank you very much. Thanks to the panelists. Some fantastic questions, some fantastic answers. I hope that's satisfied everybody's quest for knowledge. So just to move on,
I mentioned presenters. I didn't mention presenters, but thanks to the presenters, thanks to Hugh and Mario. Thanks to all the attendees. Thanks to our sponsors, O2 and Rebim. Very much appreciate that, the support. Without you, we couldn't do this. I'll also say that next week, we're not on Friday, we're on Thursday. I know that it's a bank holiday weekend and the request was to move it to Thursday. So we have another happy hour next week. And in the meanwhile, join the conversation through the website. I've been asked a number of times about presentation sessions. All the presentations are recorded. They're on social media and the link is on the COMIT website. So follow us through the usual channels, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube and Facebook. But it just leaves me to say thanks to everybody else that's participated. Thanks, Ian, for the support, the open. Thanks to Jerry, Paul, Graham, Andy, and thank you. And we'll see you on the next one. Ian, do you want to say anything to finish?
Your good health. All of you. Have a good weekend.
Keep safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers. Thanks all.
Cheers. Bye.
Cheers.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.